Who's that person that you wonder if they still think about you? What's your story with them? I've never had therapy, so it's not like I can confirm this, but I think a lot of my issues now stem from the fact that I was bullied pretty severely in elementary school. It was never physical. It almost escalated to that point a few times, but it never did. But definitely emotional. Those girls really did everything in their power to make me cry when I was already going through a divorce and some other stuff. They'd make up rumors or insult me where it hurt or just ignore me completely. I just kind of wonder if the lead bully still thinks about that. Like, does she regret it or think that what she did was wrong? Or is it like a yeah, the girl with the hair was gross and annoying thing? I really wish I could just forget about her entirely, but I can't. Does she have the same curse? I thought she was the one. She had such soulful hazel eyes. We used to sit there smiling at each other, holding long, unspoken conversations through our locked gaze. Everything was going fantastic and I was falling in love with her. About 4 months in, we both got into a funk and one day just never texted the other one again. Both of us thought the other had broken up with them. A few years later, I looked her up and we had a chat. She was engaged to a guy, and that's when we both figured out that we both thought the other had dumped us. Got to love that random bit of disconnect that railroaded a relationship. We still talk for a minute every couple years when one of us randomly gets in touch and says hi. I don't know why we do this. Does it mean something? I don't know. Probably not. Oh boy, those are the freaking worst. Both parties are too anxious to communicate their feelings when in reality you're just living in your head. I remember me and my ex not talking for an entire month because we wanted the other to reach out to us because it was long distance and communication was getting harder. But on the other hand, this sort of communication is toxic. We were friends in high school. Afterwards, she asked me out. Shortly after, her abusive parents kicked her out and she moved in with my family. A year later we moved out together. 5 years later, she told me she didn't love me like she used to. A week later she told me it was because she'd met someone else over the internet. A month later she said she couldn't figure it out unless she met him. A day later she slept with him. A day later she called me crying because he made her miss a flight back and all she wanted was to come home. I drove to the airport an hour further away in the middle of the night even though I had work the next day. Didn't even have time to process her telling me she'd slept with him. A day later she slept with me for the last time. 2 months later she broke up with me. 3 months later she moved across the country to be with him. 4 months later and she's living on her own thousands of miles away from everyone she'd ever known. It still hurts to talk to her, but I still can't stop thinking of her as my best friend. I hope one day we're in each other's lives again, but I'm scared she'll have forgotten me and everything we once were to each other. I'll tell you something good and something bad. She'll never forget you, but you need to forget her. Most of these stories are about a lost love, but I wonder about the people I've had arguments with on the internet. Like, have they ever thought about me? Are they still wrong? Do they remember that sick burn I laid on them? I wish I knew. A guy from high school who I assume most people would classify as the quintessential loser. I met him my freshman year in high school. At first, I couldn't really stand him, but soon realized it was more the kids he hung out with all the time that I really didn't like. They would always say some dark butt crap and would also say borderline racist stuff. However, his friend left towards the end of our first year. The kid remained at the school virtually friendless from what I could remember. I must admit, we did not begin hanging out or anything, but I always kept talking to him in class or briefly during lunch or in the hallways while it seemed everyone else shunned him. I quickly realized his friend was the actual craphead and that he was actually really chill. Every time we talked in class we always shared laughs. I had a pretty rough few years during high school involving family, personal issues and whatnot, so there were chunks of high school I literally just would go AWOL. However, every time I returned we would always hit it off like nothing. Fast forward to the weekend after graduation, I'm reading all the crap that people wrote in my yearbook. What he wrote was one of only 3 things that I remember. He wrote, "The world needs more people like you. Don't change." At the moment I realized how much those little moments we shared really meant to him and to me as well. I never saw or heard from him again. My old best friend. We were incredibly close. One of the best friends I've had in my life. He helped me through an abusive relationship. Then he got a girlfriend and completely forgot I exist. Ignores my texts and calls. Rip, it be like that sometimes. Not a person, but when I was biking in Chicago, a couple of dogs followed me and the people that I was with for about a half mile on a busy road. We were worried that they were going to get hit by a car and that their owner, if they had one, would be worried about them. We called animal control and put them in a fenced off area off the side of the road. I hope they're okay. Hey, I didn't know you used Reddit. Yeah, that was me and my mate Simon. He went down a dark path and is a naughty boy now, but I'm good. There should be an app for this kind of thing. You post the city or town where the lost connection happened, the story, then PPL can reconnect. I'm 40, never so much as kissed a girl. I think I might have avoidant personality disorder, at least social anxiety, but I tend not to have panic attacks. I've only had one, or get hand-shaking voice tremblingly nervous. I tend to freak out about things in anticipation and then just not do them. So when you're 14 and talking to girls is really scary, it turns out you can just not do that. And decades go by and you become a bull of self-loathing and depression. So in my 30s I accidentally made an online friend due to common interests who I later found out to be a woman and that she lived near me. We got to know each other pretty well before I knew either of those things, so that made me less anxious about everything. And she lived with her boyfriend, so that took pressure off too. Just friends is easier than thinking there's some possibility of something else. We met up in person, hung out a bit, got along really well. She decided to break up with her boyfriend and told me she was attracted to me, and I never thought in a million years she would be attracted to me, but I liked her a lot and told her I was attracted to her too. For like a day I was on top of the world, but things went awry when she went to break up with him and they stayed together. And her trying to end it scared him straight, I guess, and he stopped taking her for granted. And now they're married. Good for them. But now how do I try to be friends with this person whose husband thinks of as someone who tried to steal her from him? As rare and precious a friendship is to me, it's much less important to her than her marriage is. So I stopped reaching out to her, and she stopped reaching out to me, and friendship over. So I had a few months of severe depression over the near miss. But being who I am, I'm entirely used to not getting the girl. In the long run I just miss her friendship terribly. And I wonder if there's any chance enough time could pass that we could go back to how it was at first. And I wonder if she thinks about me and wants to have that again too. But I'm pretty sure we'll never see each other again. My little brother. I was 7 when he was born and 12 when his father died. Our mother shut down after that and kind of forced to fend for ourselves. I stayed as long as I could, but once I hit 20 I made the choice to move out because I knew staying there with her would cause me to take my own life. My mother didn't like that I left and more or less cut contact with me because I abandoned my family. My brother was 13 at the time. 5 years later, just after he turned 18, our mother died very suddenly of a heart attack. He was with her when she passed and I think it really messed with him. That was 8 years ago and I've talked to him twice since then. He won't return messages. He says it's too hard and I got that at first, but now it hurts. He's cutting me out of his life like our mother did. I just wish he would pick up when I called. I have 2 beautiful stepdaughters now that ask me about him all the time and would love to meet their uncle. Hey CJ, if you're reading this, call your big sister. Here's my long story that made me post this. Back when I was around 8 or 9 years old I met this guy, well call him B. B and I grew very close and became BF and GF at that age. B also had a best friend named E. At first he and I didn't get along at all for some reason. I just loved teasing him and that grew into us becoming best friends somehow. Around middle school B and I were taking a break, you know, just being kids. So I started talking to E way more. He was the closest I've ever been to a person. He was just so easy to talk to. Around high school B couldn't stand me being so close with E, so he wanted to tell me who I could and couldn't talk to. Of course I still talked to E, just a little less. Me and E started having a little thing. Nothing too serious, but for some reason he was just so much fun to flirt with. I've never met a guy like that. Even now we just went so well together. B completely turned on E and started kinda bullying him when he saw he was flirting with me. E was never really bothered by B though. I always admired that. But me and E drifted apart because of this. Sometimes around our junior and senior year he would come out of nowhere and it'd be like we never even stopped talking. Always gave me butterflies every time. Senior year B was just a mess and we broke up. He and I talked one last time, but now maybe in 2 years we've texted once. I miss E but I don't wanna bother him. I had a dream about him last night, it made me think of him all day, so I creeped on his Twitter and saw he's got a girlfriend now, but I still wonder if he ever thinks of me. TLDR. Grew up with 2 guys. For sure picked the wrong one to date for 9 years. The other was my best friend. Wonder if he still thinks of me. You should reach out. As someone who's been in his position, it would feel amazing if you reached out. Not because I would have an expectation that the relationship will be rekindled, though it might, but rather that you're reaching out as an acknowledgement of our shared history, that I wasn't the only one to have felt that connection. There was a guy I went to school with. He came to my school in 4th grade. We got seated together, and we became really good friends. When we were in 8th grade, it was looking like we were going to be something more. Then he moved away, never saying a word. I still have dreams about him. All the dreams are me seeing him again. I found him on Facebook, but he's married with kids, and I don't want to bother him. At least he looks happy, but I wonder if he ever thinks about me. I worked for a school and was laid off suddenly. Hadn't done anything wrong. The position just no longer existed and no budget for me elsewhere. And I miss all my kids so bad. There's just nothing to do about it. You know? Like how weird would it be to contact a parent and ask to see their kid? And it's so hard for people to understand. They just don't get it. How hard it hit me to go from seeing these people every day to nothing without any warning. I have been struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts for years, even before being laid off, and almost killed myself when I tried to talk to my brother about it. He said they're not your kids, get over it. The only reason I didn't was that when I hung up on him he texted mom saying he didn't know what to do, so she called me and talked me down. I don't think any of them realize it. Then the next time I saw him he had the audacity to tell me I can talk to him about anything. To anyone dealing with an upset person, never ever tell them to get over it. It doesn't help. A kindergarten teacher at my church. 4 years ago, at my church's college Bible study, I overheard her talking about me in a negative way. She said, "Hey, you don't wanna sit with that loser over there. I have visual impairments, blind in left eye, can only see out of my right eye, and Asperger's. So, that's gonna stick with me for the rest of my life." I left the group because of what she said. What kind of a church-going person says such a thing? A grown adult, who is also a kindergarten teacher, should have known better than to talk about someone like that. Curious as to how many people are here hoping they find the person they're thinking about. I hope you all find your lost loves, or if not, closure. I'm such a fool for reading a thread this long just to see if I read someone describing me or how we both met. It's been 9 months and I still expect a message from him would appear on my phone. A lot of people. I get far more attached to people than anyone has ever been to me. So I know they don't think about me at all actually, but I usually am hoping things are good for them. Or I hope they got what they deserve. Whatever the case may be. Back in 2010, I had just moved to Korea to teach English. One morning, I was riding the bus to work and it was just me and a cute young Korean woman. I noticed her looking at me several times. About 5 minutes into the ride, I let out a really long hot silent fart. I had consumed massive amounts of kimchi the night before and my body couldn't process it. Even though we were about 10 feet apart, my fart was so powerful that it overwhelmed her. I was even grossed out myself. She recoiled in horror, gave me a look that showed she was both angry and bewildered, covered her nose with her shirt, and moved as far away as she could from me. I still think about her and I wonder if she thinks about me too. I am a crisis support counselor on a suicide line. I talk to one person for far longer than we are supposed to, over twice as long. They were planning on committing suicide that day. They had the means within reach and said there was nothing that could stop them. By the end they told me I saved their life. I started to cry while still on the phone. I was shaking. We don't save lives. We listen to people and they find their own way through it, if we are lucky, and that is exactly what happened in this case. The person got out all their feelings, all their reason for dying, and then they were able to see all their reasons for living. All I did was listen, but still they thought I saved their life. It honestly felt like so much pressure to think of myself in a life-saving role. I don't want to have someone's life in my hands. I took a month off after. I know for people who don't work in this field it sounds weird for me to say I don't want to feel like I save lives, but we can't believe that. Because then what about all the people who end up taking their life? Is that our fault? Your life is in your own hands when you call us and it stays that way throughout. Literally all we do is listen. I think about this person a lot and I wonder how they are doing now. I hope they now recognize it was them that saved their own life and that gives them strength moving forward. Do they ever think about me? Who knows? I know he still doesn't think about me, but here's my long tale. Freshman year. He was wearing a suit during a business convention we were at. Dark hair, the most heart-melting black eyes. When my eyes first laid on him, I could feel my heart skip a beat. We were inseparable for the 3 days of the convention. We took long walks around the shut-off fountain in the icy February weather, just talking. We started dating just after. It was a long distance, 2 hours apart. Both sides hesitated on the age, with him being 4 years older than myself. But we made it work, seeing each other every weekend. Prom was around the corner. I had been shopping for a dress. He was working late at his job to save up to treat me right. I had gotten him to quit stealing beers and start sobering up for college. He was going to a school an hour from me. He called me on his way home, like he always did. It was about 9, and he was running to the store to pick up some things for his mom. A drunk driver struck his car on the driver's side after running a red light. The noise it made haunts me. I remember his closed casket funeral. They buried him in his suit. I wonder if his mom knows I still have the rose that I refused to throw. I wonder if he knows, wherever he is, that he haunts my dreams. Thinking about how different my life would be if he was still alive. A woman in Carlsbad, near San Diego. Her name is Anna. I don't want to go into too many details on the internet, but she was a life changer. Hi Anna, if you're reading, that mad Australian still thinks about you. Hope you're doing great. My first love. I dated him in high school. I was a senior and he was a junior. I'd never believed in true love at first sight, but honestly, the moment I met him there was an instant spark. We started talking right away. Although our relationship was short-lived in high school, he cheated on me. I never really forgot him. 3 years later, he messages me on Facebook and asked to meet up. It was as if nothing had changed. Again we instantly hit it off. We started dating again, but our times and locations weren't a good match and he couldn't deal with a long distance relationship. I was willing to try it, but not him. Through the years, we'd randomly meet up and hang out sometimes and we tried dating again but it never worked. I mainly blamed him BC he wasn't good at communicating. This relationship went on for about 10 years. Who would have, though some silly boy I met in high school would be so hard to get over. I finally called it quits this summer BC. I didn't like the way he treated me. Lack of communication and sometimes I felt like I couldn't trust him. He was upset that I broke it off BC. He had moved back to my town to be with me but in the end I decided it wasn't good enough. I don't hate him. As a matter of fact, I think I'll always love him. He was literally my twin. We were so in sync with each other. We could read each other's thoughts and finish each other's sentences, etc. Our interests and hobbies were very aligned as well. It's kinda weird how we were so alike. I still think about him, but I don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling anymore. Most times when I think about him, I get mad BC he ruined us. We could have been perfect. The ex. Never in a try again way. He was, and from last communication, was not a nice guy. Besides being fickle, he used me for 5 years, made my self-esteem non-existent. That's on me for staying, but manipulating me for another 5 with false hope and lies, that's on him. I was stupid, but I'm in a better place now. Got a decent thing going. I love that dude so much, but he was just the worst. It's almost like some sickness. I want to know that me leaving affected him. Like, do I cross his mind at all? But I hate myself for wanting to know, because I know what the answer is. I was nothing to him then, and silence speaks louder than any words ever would. Oh well. Mainly old video game friends from my younger teens. People I met on Halo 2 or World of Warcraft that I talk to every day on Xbox Live or Ventrilo that I built friendships with. One day either I stopped logging on, or they did and we never spoke again. Some of the best memories from my teenage years are with people I never actually met, and probably never will meet. I think about them a lot when I solo queue on games nowadays, and I really wonder if they think about me. A girl I recently fell in love with but can't have. I don't think I can type it all out on my phone while in bed. However, if anyone is interested, I have it all typed out in a Google Doc. A friend wanted to know why I'm so depressed recently, so I typed it out for him. So, if anyone's interested, PM me and I'll send you the file in the morning. Mine is a bit different. I guess I don't quite wonder. There was a quiet but obviously hurting kid at my high school. I knew him in 9th and part of 10th grade. He slept in class sometimes and I'd kick his feet to wake him up before the teacher noticed. He got in trouble here and there but nothing huge. As far as I could tell, he was an average teenager, but you could just tell he was having trouble at home. I knew what that looked like. I was always nice to him. I figured even if I wasn't considered his friend that I considered him my friend. I even got him a birthday present one year. He looked genuinely surprised. It was a CD one found on sale at Walgreens of a band he'd talked about. I begged my parents to get it for me and wrapped it for him. It turns out he hardly ever was given birthday presents. Anyhow, about halfway through 10th grade he disappeared from school and never came back. Not a word was said by him before he left and the teacher said nothing. I wondered about that kid. I always did. Was he okay? Where did he go? There wasn't any social media to look him up and see what he was up to back then, so I thought I'd never know, especially after I moved away. But he always popped into my head. A very long story short, several years later we caught back up and he is now my husband. I never in my wildest imagination would have thought he and I together. It's just all so seemingly random. Life is funny like that. The past 10 years have been completely randomly and wonderful but crazy. My life is anything but boring. There are two people in my story that I think about often and wonder if they still think about us because they had a big impact on my life. My pregnant wife had sensed something was wrong a few weeks before our daughter, our second child, was due. She asked her OB to induce her early several times but was rebuffed each time. At 2 a.m., 3 days before the scheduled delivery date, my wife woke me up and said I don't feel her anymore. I grabbed her overnight bag that we prepared and started to drive her to the hospital. Since it was late at night, the roads were clear. I was driving down the road when we encountered a navy blue Chevy Cobalt that was traveling about 10 miles per hour under the speed limit. I tried to pass the person, but they moved into the oncoming lane to prevent us from passing. I was in a panic. I tried several more times after that to no avail. This happened for about 3 or 4 miles until the person turned off of the road. I don't know who that person is, but I hate them with all of my being. I often wonder if they ever think about the person behind them and what they were going through. My daughter was born still that night. We came home without a child in our arms and it was such a cold and awful feeling. We signed up for a bereavement counseling session at a hospice center near us. The counselor was a wonderful woman who really helped my wife and I through the struggles that follow the loss of a child. Over the next year or so, my wife and I decided to have another child. 6 weeks before my wife was due, her water broke. At this point, my wife had a different, much less conservative OB, and plans to live in a different hospital. When we got to the hospital, my wife was already in labor. I'm sitting at my wife's bedside and in walks our bereavement counselor, who was also a labor and delivery nurse at the hospital we had gone to. She helped deliver our son that morning, who was a bit undercooked, but did just fine. It was such a bittersweet moment for us. We had a boy who we loved unconditionally, who was only here because our daughter had passed. Our counselor was there to help us through it all. If I was still Catholic, she'd be what you would call our guardian angel. She moved out of the area and we sort of lost touch. I still think about her and always wonder if our family had as much of an impact on her life as she did to ours. A friend whom I've had way too much drama with, mainly because we had a short romantic past. However, I think it's best for us both to not be friends, even though that saddens me a lot. I stopped for a lady that was broken down in the middle of the street. Turned out she was also in labor. We didn't have time to get to a hospital, so I called 911 and stayed with her as she gave birth in the front seat of her car. I never heard from her again. I hope she and the baby are doing fantastically. I wonder if she's told him about me and his crazy birth story. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.